After assuring the Thessalonians in the first letter that their loved ones who have died will not be left out of the return of Jesus, it seems that some of them may have misunderstood some of what Paul was telling them. Some of them seem to have thought that Paul was saying that Jesus' return was imminent. So imminent that some of them stopped working entirely, perhaps to wait for these events to unfold. Paul reminds them that though he said that Jesus would return at an unexpected hour, there was still at least one prophecy that was unfulfilled. Because it was still unfulfilled, that tells them that his return is not in the near future time frame, at least for them. That prophecy is of someone he calls the Man of Lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 12. Of course, everyone reading this passage ends up asking the same question. Who is this man of lawlessness? Though some have tried to fit this person with a current political figure that they don't like, which so far has not stood the test of time, there are three main approaches that Christians have on who this is referring to. I'll give them in order of when they each believe that this prophecy is fulfilled. The first approach relates this prophecy and the man of lawlessness with events that happened less than 20 years after the writing of this letter. Beginning late in the year AD 66 and culminating with the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 was a terrible event known as the Jewish-Roman War, sometimes just referred to as the fall of Jerusalem. In this event, lawlessness definitely ensued on both sides of the battle, and many countless people suffered and died as a result. There are some who see the man of lawlessness as one of the Jewish rebels, and some who see it as one of the Roman generals, and a good case can be made for either. Both groups were guilty of defiling the temple in Jerusalem and using it as their throne room, fulfilling verse 4. The next approach is the one held by seemingly all of the early church fathers in the first centuries after Christ. They believed that Paul had a good reason for being somewhat vague in the details that he gave. For instance, in verses 5, 6, and 7, he doesn't mention what was holding the man of lawlessness back. Instead, he reminds his readers that he told them about this when he was with them, and deliberately does not mention again what it was. Why doesn't he mention it? Because it was the Roman Empire holding it back. If Paul had written it down and this letter had gotten into the wrong hands, it could be misconstrued to mean that Paul was advocating an overthrow of the empire. So, who specifically was the man of lawlessness according to this view? This is where it becomes less clear to us today. They taught that at the fall of the Roman Empire, the man of lawlessness would arise and bring a great persecution against Christians. They say that he did not take a seat in the literal physical temple, as that had long since been destroyed, but he took his seat in the temple as the New Testament authors define it, meaning the followers of Jesus or his church. By posing as a follower of Christ but preaching a counterfeit gospel, he led many people away from Christ, taking the focus that should be on Christ and placing it on himself. The last approach was first proposed by a Jesuit priest named Francisco Ribera about 500 years ago and is the one that many people today might be most familiar with. This view says that the man of lawlessness is a person who is still to come and will appear shortly before the return of Christ. It is believed that this man of lawlessness will set himself up as a powerful political and religious leader. He will use deceit and even satanic power to lead many people to follow him, possibly including some Christians. However, his time will be cut short by the return of Christ, at which time Jesus destroys him with the breath of his mouth. This is one of the more difficult passages in the New Testament and one that we may never be fully clear about. But if it seems confusing to us, at least we can take comfort that even scholars like Augustine said regarding some of this passage, "I frankly confess I do not know what he means." Even though we may not be fully clear about the fulfillment of this passage, our responsibility remains the same. As Paul says in 1:12, that the name of our Lord Jesus may be glorified in you and you in him.